The following is a conversation with National Geographic photographer Bob Holmes. Bob has been the most successful and prolific travel photographers. He has been in the industry for the last 40 years. The Society of American Travel Writers has given him Travel Photographer of the Year award 5 times. In 2015, he won the International Erasmus Wine Photographer of the Year competition and again in 2016 as well. In the same year, he won Marks & Spencer's Food Photographer of the Year award. He has worked for National Geographic, Geo, Savior, Wine Spectator, Life magazine, Time magazine, and hundreds of other major magazines and collaborated with some of the best international companies in all these years. His stock catalogue of over 500,000 images is represented for licensing by Getty. He has illustrated over 45 books and authored and photographed The Traveler's Wine Guide to California, which won him the prestigious Lowell Thomas Award. Currently, he is a fellow of both the Royal Geographical Society and the Explorers Club. I had the privilege to bring him to the Portrait Bazaar show. In this podcast, we talked about so many topics ranging from his experience working with National Geographic to his first meeting with the photography maestro Ansel Adams himself. Bob also narrated one of his adventurous stories that took place while doing his first Nat Geo project in northern Pakistan. We also talked about his journey from being a city planner for a county to becoming such a prolific figure in the photography industry. As Bob shares his journey with us, I enjoyed every bit of this session. Bob also loved the conversation and promised me to meet soon. I hope you'll enjoy the session. The conversation starts in 3, 2, 1. So Bob, thank you so much for doing this. Welcome to the Portrait Bazaar show. It really means a lot to me. It really means a lot to me.
I'm honored to be invited, Vipin.
That's great. So tell me, what are you like? How are you keeping yourself busy these days? I mean, are you working on any photo assignments or planning for photo tours?
Always. I've just finished a book on pistachios.
Okay.
I'm working on another book on an old brothel that's been abandoned for the last 50 years, which is a fabulous old building. It's falling apart. I'm planning a trip to Colombia in June, a workshop in Colombia, possibly one in Oaxaca in October next year. Okay. So,
have you heard about like Chandni Chowk?
Oh, I know Chandni Chowk really well. I spent 3 years in India.
Oh, right. You have mentioned that.
And I was in Delhi. I was in Delhi that was my hub.
Okay. So you know Delhi like inside out.
I used to. I don't now. No.
So when was the last time you visited India?
Probably 6 years ago.
Okay, for a photo tour?
Yeah. 6 or 7 years ago. Prior to that, in the 1980s, I was there for months at a time, working on stories. I did 2 National Geographic pieces.
Right.
A story on Jainism, another one on silk,
right?
Another one of the architecture of Shah Jahan.
Mughal architecture.
Yeah, Mughal architecture. Based around is the Romance of the Taj. The book that was published was the Romance of the Taj. So I still know India pretty well.
That's great. That's great.
I'll have a love-hate relationship with the place.
With India. We'll cover that in the later part of the interview. So my question is, tell me if there is anything left for you to achieve, Bob. I mean, after achieving so many things in photography industry, what is it that still motivates you or that still drives you?
I'm a compulsive photographer. Sometimes I wonder why I'm shooting, because there's no longer a market for what I'm shooting, but I can't help it. It's a compulsion. I'm seeing things. I'm always looking and seeing. Most people look but don't really see.
Right.
I always tell students that you have to get to the stage when you're looking analytically and really seeing what's in front of you. So I'm doing that all the time. I don't feel I really achieved very much.
Still,
it's odd. It's really odd, Vipin. I still feel I came into photography as an amateur. I was a city planner when I first started. My postgraduate degree is in city planning. So I worked in local government for nearly 14 years. My dream was always to be a photographer. That was my goal. And it took me 14 years to get out of local government and into photography. I jumped into photography without any training. I'm completely self-taught. And the area that I've always been really lacking in is the business side. I've always been a decent photographer. And I can think analytically and shoot stories. And produce strong images for those stories, but the business side of it, I'm hopeless. I'd get an assignment in India, for example. I get an assignment for say 3 weeks, and I'd spend 3 months there. So any money I made, I blew on doing more stuff in the places I was visiting because I loved it. And that's not smart business, but it's been a great life.
Right. But I face the same problem with me as well. I mean, as far as photography, the photography part of it is concerned, I'm good with that, but the business part is like for sure lacking.
Yeah, the one thing that schools don't teach is the business, usually.
It's business, of course. And it is important. Like any other business, photography is also a business as well.
It's almost the most important element. There are so many really good photographers who haven't survived because of their business skills. My business skills are not great, but they're good enough to survive.
How did you manage to survive for like 40 long years when your business skills are not that great?
I've been adaptable. When digital photography came in, I was slow. I wasn't so slow to embrace it, but I was a little bit slow. My partner at the time sort of forced me into it. She got a camera for me, a Nikon D2X, and convinced me it was the way to go. And I was reluctant, and then I embraced it. And that was in 2003, and I haven't shot any film since. And I, more recently, I switched genres. I was a travel photographer to start with. I switched from travel photography to food and wine. And then still photography with the quality of digital cameras now, the quality of still images on a smartphone are almost equal to a reasonable regular digital camera, not the top end ones, but a decent one. And that killed a lot of my business. So I switched to video. And probably 70% of my income now is from video, and also teaching. So you have to be flexible. You move with the markets.
I was reading like your you have like your photography blog website, and I was reading the bio section of it, and over there you have also mentioned that the key to your success to keep yourself in this business is flexibility.
Yes, it's absolutely essential. You have to be flexible, and that's how I've survived.
Right. So let's get back to your early teens. I would like to start from there. I got to know that in your early teens, you were passionate about photography and climbing.
Yes.
So I would like to know, how did that passion for photography and climbing ignited inside you? I mean, were you inspired by somebody else, or was it just a personal exploration from your end?
Well, I was always a loner at school. I didn't like team sports. I was a typical kid that's never gets chosen for a team because they're so bad. I don't have any ball sense. I used to play squash with a friend who was really good, and he would just stand. If you know squash, there's a tee,
right,
and you stand at the tee, and he could hit that ball, and it would go like a bullet, and I'd be running like crazy all over the court. And I got a lot of exercise. He didn't, but I could never hit the ball and get the same momentum of speed.
Right.
I just and the same with tennis or any ball sport.
Yeah.
And so I was hopeless at team sports. And I gravitated towards cross-country running, which obviously is very solitary, and then into climbing. As a member of sort of equivalent to the Boy Scouts in England, and we used to go hiking in my local hills when I was 13, and that led on to climbing. We started rock climbing, and it developed into major mountaineering. Well, very high standard rock climbing and mountaineering, but at the same time, I was always interested in photography. My dad was an amateur photographer.
Okay.
Not a very serious amateur, but he had a reasonable camera. He had a Zeiss Icon. It had knobs and dials.
Right.
Loved. I liked the technical side of it. And I started to make prints. And I loved that side of it as well. And I was always interested in painting. I used to paint oil paint. And I was a weird kid. I'd spend days in my bedroom oil painting. I still got some of those paintings.
And you're inspired by modern paintings as well. You've mentioned it.
Yeah, that's my main. I think the thing that has really molded my vision over the last 40 or 50 years is my love of abstract expressionism. And a lot of modern painting schools, I really resonate with them. I'm not saying that that's a way for every photographer to go out and get inspiration. That's has to be what I resonate with. Someone else might like Warhol or whatever, or even more of the pop artists. It doesn't matter. As long as you can recognize that source of information and use it to your own advantage so that it helps you develop a vision as a photographer and a personal way of seeing.
Right. So tell me, how does paintings helped you?
Well, because of the aesthetics.
Okay.
I was always interested in aesthetics.
Okay. Right. And
as a lot of photographers have been, like Cartier Bresson, Henri Cartier Bresson, thought himself as a visual artist outside of photography. He spent the last years of his life drawing and painting, not as a photographer. And Brett Weston was really interested in sculpture. Nobody knows about that, but I used to know Brett fairly well. I go to his house, and he had these. I didn't think they were great, but they're interesting pieces of sculpture that was a passion with him. So
and are you into movies as well? Like,
yes,
do you think movies help you or movies motivate you in like photography as well?
Not in still photography so much. They do in video, obviously in video, because that's the medium.
Right.
And sometimes I get too caught up in the narrative of the movie. And my partner, she looks at the technical side of movies and how cuts are made, and I do too, to a large extent. I must admit, I'm always looking at that. So the arc of a movie is important, but the movies I make are very simplistic. They're movies promoting wineries or showing some aspect of a winery, either the vineyards or whatever. So it's a different type of movie.
I understand that. So, like you mentioned earlier that, before becoming a full-time photographer, you were working as a city planner in a county.
Yes.
And so I want to ask you how hard it was to quit your job and get into a profession that was full of uncertainty at that time. It must have been very, very hard for you.
Looking back on it, Vipin, I don't know how I had the guts to do it.
Right.
I was 35 years old.
And it was a safe, secure job at that time.
Oh, it's absolutely secure. I got 6 weeks vacation a year. I got a 2% car loan.
Okay.
No, sorry, I got a free car loan and a 2% mortgage.
Right.
And absolute security. And I was the deputy.
Right. Okay.
And my dad thought I was absolutely crazy. He thought I was idiotic giving all that up.
Right.
But I had to do it.
You had to do it.
I was determined to be a photographer. And eventually, my dad was happy that I did, but to start with, because I didn't have any experience as a professional or minimal. I'd been on a couple of big expeditions, climbing expeditions. I'd done something for the BBC with the Queen.
Right. And also, I would like to stop you here. I would also love to, love you to, if you could just tell this story about your chief executive giving you that ultimatum of.
Oh, yeah, that was interesting. I worked for a fairly small county in England, in the North Midlands of England, in Nottinghamshire.
Right.
And the chief executive of the county had been promoted from an even smaller local authority.
Okay.
He was very pompous and self-important.
Right.
He was the guy was a jerk. And I got this assignment. My ex-wife was a BBC producer.
Okay.
And through her, I got this assignment to photograph the Queen's Jubilee tour for the BBC.
Right.
And I would go around with her. I was one of 3 photographers that got what's called a Royal Rota Pass, which there's people who've got the highest clearance, and they only give a small number of these out, and there's just 3 of us. So there's me and 2 bona fide newspaper photographers. So I was going around with the Queen, literally next to her every day. And I remember one night we went to a reception at Nottinghamshire County Hall. It's a huge deal. Yeah, it's a huge deal. And I was there next to the Queen, and she would go down this receiving line of sort of the local dignitaries. And Albert Hodder, who was the chief executive, Albert was at the far end of the receiving line as one of the line of people. So nonchalantly standing next to her, walking down with her and Prince Philip. And he was beside himself. He called me to the office a week later and told me I had to decide what I wanted to do, whether or not I was going to be a photographer or a planner.
Right.
He just hauled me over the coals. And then to make it even worse, I gave a talk at the local Rotary Club, guest of honor, and he was sitting way down at the table. So there's a minor guest at the Rotary Club meeting. I was a guest.
And you must have feeling like over the moon at that time.
Well, it had a certain satisfaction. Yes.
Right, I can understand that. Yeah. So in 1975, you accompanied British Everest expedition.
Yes.
And in 77, you got the chance to accompany the Queen that you just mentioned.
Yeah.
And it was at that time you quit your job and you get into professional photography.
I quit my job in 79.
79.
Yeah.
Okay. And 1 year later, you got the chance to work for National Geographic.
Yeah.
In 1980.
Yes. Yeah.
It's like every photographer's dream to, someday work for National Geographic.
Well, when you're at an early stage as a photographer,
right,
you think you're great.
Right.
Yeah, you think, I'm a National Geographic photographer.
Everybody thinks like that.
And looking back on it, it was embarrassing because I really was. And I look back on some of those early assignments. I've been going through the photographs this week, in fact, and some are embarrassingly bad, really, really bad.
Okay.
Because it was film. It's in the days of film, and you couldn't monitor. And these assignments were always one was in Pakistan, another one was in Nepal. I walked across Nepal from India to Tibet, doing a story on snow leopards, and half the photographs are badly exposed. Unforgivable.
And digital photography has helped a lot now.
Oh, with digital, you get instant feedback and you can adjust them. You can use programs to adjust them.
You can adjust them, and if you don't like the image, you can delete them then and there.
Yeah.
But with film, it must have been very hard at that time.
And the worst thing was you had to send the film. I had to send the film back to Washington, straight to Geographic. So I never got to know what was on it. It would be packaged up. I'd ship it to Washington, and then just keep on shooting.
Right.
So it was.
It was hard.
It was difficult. Yeah.
It was difficult.
And
So
yeah, and until 2003, I
Right.
traveled all over the world doing this with film. I don't know if I had the nerve to do it, but I got increasingly competent technically. Over those 20 years, I
Right.
became a very good technical photographer,
Right.
which was good training for digital, because now with
For
digital,
sure. For sure.
I'm a far more competent photographer.
And people like me who who directly got a chance to shoot in digital, we cannot understand the the hardships and difficulties you must have gone through when
Yeah.
when you were like filming with film.
Oh yeah, it was
And film
nerve-wracking.
and the technical aspect of film photographers is like amazing.
You didn't really think about it though, because
Right.
yeah, it's what you did. You didn't have any choice. There was only film photography, so you just did it. But I don't know. If I had to go back to it now, it'd be totally different. I'd be scared stiff. You know, I'd be very, very nervous.
I can understand that. I was going through the video that you shared with me, or that email, and you mentioned that Mr. Gilchrist, if I'm like remember the name, that gave you the chance to.
Yeah, Bob Gilker.
Bob Gilker,
Bob
who
Gilker.
gave you the chance.
He was a legendary director of photography at Geographic.
Okay, that's great. I would love to like read about him. We'll do that. So you mentioned in that video that Bob told you that you're getting this chance because you knocked into the door. You're not getting the chance because your photographs are good.
And that has been the story of my success as a photographer. What success there is. I've made opportunities for myself.
And you must have been good with marketing and made connections with other people as well.
I'm good at making connections with people, not so much as marketing. I'm not really good, but I'm a better marketer than I think. It's very soft sell. I can't. In America, people boast about themselves. They'll send a marketing email out saying that they're the best photographer around. The number one wine photographer in California or whatever. And I can't do that because I know it isn't true. And as a Brit, we tend to downplay things. And I find it impossible to boast about what I do. I find it embarrassing.
And do you think it happens because we are like self-learned photographers, self-taught photographers? So we never reach to a point where we think that, okay, now I've arrived and now I know everything.
I still think I'm an amateur. And I am, in the true sense of the word, because I love it. I am an amateur. I'm a photographer because I love it. And friends often ask me, well, when I see people I haven't seen for a long time, they ask me if I've retired. And I always say, what would I do if I retired? I'd take up photography. So why not get paid for it?
That's true.
So really, I consider I haven't worked since I was 35. In one sense, I've just done what I love.
And you must have like you need that passion and that drive in you to do something like this, because photography is full of uncertainty, and it still is, still is.
Oh, even more so, probably.
Even more so.
Yeah, ironically, there are more outlets for photography now than there've ever been. But there's far less money available. There are thousands of outlets, but very few of those outlets could provide any kind of income. If any income at all. Certainly not realistic. So, it's the industry's changed. And you have to be passionate about it to want to go into it, because very few people really
got a chance to.
I'm, in the area that I'm in, I do extremely well, better than 90% of photographers. And it's, I don't really know how that happens. It's alarming because I can live comfortably. I make enough money to survive, and I live in the most expensive area in the States. Marin County, the county I live in, is a very expensive place to live. But I survive here. And it's mainly through word. It's because I've been in the business a long time,
Right.
and it's word of mouth. I know a lot of people. It's a functional age because I've been around for so long. I know a huge number of people. I work well with people, so I get a lot of referrals. Nearly every job I get is the result of a referral. So I don't do any promotion at all. I used to. When I first started, I did. And I sponsored Minolta cameras for a time. They used to give me all my equipment, and they ran double page spreads in magazines of me and my photographs.
Right.
And a few things like that. A series of backpacks early in the 80s, and Jobo processing equipment sponsored me.
Okay.
I did a bunch of ads for Jobo. So, but that was in the 80s. I haven't done anything like that since.
And I want to ask you, what do you think are the challenges in front of like modern contemporary photographers these days, with technology, expanding so rapidly, and with social media expansion of that sort? What do you think are the challenges in front of photographers these days, according to you?
I think the possibilities now are really, really exciting. With the technological developments. Ansel Adams, who was probably as traditional a photographer as you can get, shoot large format and a little bit of medium format. He showed me photographs that he could never print. It was technically impossible to print the negatives
at that time.
Manipulate them on what's called a Cytex machine. Which was, I guess, it's an incredibly expensive piece of equipment that printers used. And he'd go to his printer in the Bay Area and use this Cytex machine. He showed me prints that had been made using this machine. And really, is the first, what we have now is Photoshop. And really an early form of Photoshop. And Ansel would have embraced all the digital. Well, he embraced it before it was available.
Right.
He was already messing with the digital stuff, although very few people know that.
Right.
But there's some photographs in his books that are digital photographs. They were shot on large format, but the final image was from a digital file, a Cytex file. So he would have embraced everything as well. As far as social media is concerned, I don't know. I've got mixed feelings about it. It's difficult to say I'm active. I'm present on Instagram.
So you don't use Instagram that much on a regular basis?
I go through phases. I try to. I've got a decent number of followers.
Right.
I think I've got over 15,000 followers now.
Yes.
And I sort of enjoy doing it, but I always feel that I don't just post on Instagram for the sake of it. I always feel there should be some message behind the image that I post.
That's true.
Photographic information, a teaching point. I need something to say.
Right.
And that takes effort. Yeah.
Right.
In fact, I'm going to post something in the next few days. But I do post regularly, but not frequently.
Yeah, I've seen your Instagram account as well. I mean, and the thing with Instagram is that they're constantly changing their algorithms, and I don't know if they're supporting photographers now or not. They are just supporting reels and short format
exactly.
content.
And I've never done a reel.
Right.
I don't really understand them.
Yeah, that's one area that I'm also not concerned about, or I'm not good at.
Yeah, I have a friend who is a professional blogger.
Okay.
She travels continually blogging and survives very well doing it. She makes a decent living, but she puts all her energy into reels, and they're very well done. But they're a different demographic. She's 50 years younger than me.
Yeah, that's right.
She's a young kid relatively, and she's able to put these things together with very fast-paced music.
Right.
And they're effective, and she's got a big following. And as I say, she gets lots of sponsorships and makes a good living. But that's
Right.
not, I can't do that. It's not what I'm
That,
all about.
but
It
that's
isn't
not
me.
photography. But that's not photography.
No, it's not. You're right, it's not. But for
It's not.
workshops, it grabs people's attention.
For sure, for sure. It grabs people's attention, but I've seen that, nowadays, a lot of photographers whom I used to respect a lot, they have started doing all those nonsensical things just for the sake of engagement and just for the sake of number game.
Yeah. Well, Dave
Yeah.
Harvey does. I don't know if you know Dave Harvey.
No,
David Allen Harvey.
no, I haven't heard about him.
He was a Magnum photographer
Okay, okay,
in
okay.
the States. And he's doing reels and that stuff now. He also
Okay,
posts stills, but a lot of photographers are doing reels. And I've
right.
got to embrace it at some time for the workshops, but I haven't yet.
So, Bob, you just mentioned Ansel Adams here, and
Yeah,
I want to tell you that I've been a huge Ansel Adams fan, and I got to know that in 1976, I guess you got to meet the person, you got to meet Ansel
yeah,
Adams,
yeah.
and you also did a story on him as well.
Well, that was a result of knowing him.
Okay,
Yeah, that's how I got into Geographic.
okay.
That's almost a direct route. I met Ansel in London,
Mm-hmm.
and we spent some time talking,
Mm-hmm.
and he invited me over to the States
Okay.
to see him, sort of casually. So, yeah, if you're ever in California, come down and see me.
Okay.
And a year later, I went to California
Mm.
and I called him, went down to see him, and I stayed with him for several days. He's
Mm.
incredibly hospitable. And I couldn't get away. I
Okay.
kept wanting to leave and do other things. And he'd invite someone over to dinner. Like Maggie Weston came one night, who was Edward Weston's daughter-in-law.
Okay.
Maggie came over, the leader of the Boston Symphony Orchestra, guy down there. And every night there'd be some other person invited over for dinner. And I got to know him really well, obviously. And then a couple of years later, I moved over to live. And the first person I contacted was Ansel. He introduced me to friends of his in where I live now. None of them are alive anymore, but we kept up our friendship. And then a magazine, I didn't have any work as a photographer. I came over, I had no way of making a living. And the magazine had just started called Darkroom Photography, which was a national newsstand magazine that happened to be published out of San Francisco.
Okay.
So I called the editor. I saw a few copies of the magazine.
Okay.
And I did research, which is really important. If you whoever you're working for, do some research to find out what they like.
Right.
And I saw these copies of the magazine. I saw they did a series called Masters of Photography every month, and they'd never done Ansel. I made an appointment to go in and see the editor, and I said, would you like an interview with Ansel Adams? And she said, of course we would. Been trying to get one since the magazine started, but we haven't been able to. I said, well, if I go down and get one, would you like it? He said, yeah, right. I'll believe it when I see it, basically. And I went home. I called Ansel, said, oh yeah, come down, spend the night, take some photographs in the dark room and so on. So I did a whole story on him, and she was so impressed by this. She put me on the masthead of the magazine. I became a contributing editor overnight.
Okay.
And then I did interviews with Brett Weston, a lot of the greats that were alive at that time. And then the way it led to Geographic was I thought, I don't want to be doing this. I want to be a photographer. So I suggested to her, why don't we do interviews with some of the people that are behind great photography, like the director of photography at National Geographic. And so I put together a portfolio. I arranged to do an interview with Bob Gilker. And it was very difficult to get in to see. In fact, his secretary thought I was wasting my time. She said he rarely gives interviews to people. He said, I'll ask him and we'll get back to you. But I'm not optimistic. And then a couple of weeks later, she calls me and said, Mr. Gilker's agreed to be interviewed. So just let us know when you come over to Washington.
Right.
went over with a portfolio. And that's the whole story about me getting through his door.
Right.
I engineered it.
Right.
He told me later he didn't think the photographs were particularly good. They're okay. They were competent.
Right.
The fact that I got through his door meant I could handle an assignment.
Right.
And that's a really important lesson. You have to be creative, not only visually, but creative in the way you create opportunities.
Right. How you create opportunities for yourself, and you have to just, put yourself out there in front of people as much as you can.
Yeah, because, all the stories I've done, like the stories I've done in India, I just go over, I get an assignment from a magazine. It would usually be a very open-ended assignment for Jainism, for example, the story of Jains. It was a major story. I did as much research as I could at home, but when I was on the ground in India, I remember spending 2 weeks looking for a group of Digambara.
Okay.
I think Digambara, the Shekambara clothed and Digambara naked.
Right.
And it's difficult to find them. And I spent 2 weeks in Rajasthan, and I kept hearing rumors of this group of Digambara Jains wandering around. And eventually I found them. They're having an 80th birthday party for one of their group.
Okay.
And they were great.
Right. And you have shot.
But you're thinking on your feet all the time and
all the time,
asking questions. You're a reporter. It's photojournalism.
Right.
Well, it was. Even if it's a straight travel story, like the story I did on silk in India. I had to do all the research on that. And then I had to find, the silkworm operations down. I was down in Bangalore, then up to Madras, then up to Varanasi. I was all over the place following the trail of silk.
Right. And what about Varanasi? You have been to Varanasi as well?
I go as often as I can. Yeah.
What do you find like the most interesting about Varanasi? It's very crowded for sure.
Obviously, the Ghats are the Ghats are the interesting part of Varanasi, without question, and that whole area around the Ghats. It's incredibly atmospheric.
Right.
Early morning at the Ghats is phenomenal. Yeah.
I was reading one of your blog in which you mentioned about your Varanasi, trip, and the way you mentioned about all the events that's happening around in the busy bustling streets of Varanasi. That was amazing, and the photos were like so captivating.
Yeah, it's overwhelming for a lot of Westerners.
Right.
But I love it. Yeah, I know India so well, I guess. Even Chandni Chowk. We were talking about Chandni Chowk earlier. I took a friend to Chandni Chowk, and I left him. I said, I've just got to go and do something. I left him in the middle of Chandni Chowk. He'd never been to India before, and he just freaked out. He got a rickshaw back to the hotel because he couldn't handle it.
Right, I can understand that.
When it's busy, it's rickshaws, bikes, pedestrians, cows, everything. I love that. I love that. Very exciting to me, and it's. I don't know whether you know the work of Alex Webb.
Alex Webb, yes.
Yeah, Alex's work is.
I don't know that one.
Who's that?
My Alex. It's my Alexa.
Alexa didn't know him. She's got to get out more.
Right.
No, Alex works with these situations brilliantly. And I've worked alongside Alex. We've worked on books together. There's a series of books called Day in the Life.
Okay.
Day in the Life of countries all over the world. And Alex and I have frequently been together on those shoots. And I've seen him work, and he'll find something that really interests him, and then just wait until all the elements come together. He's the best there is at that. There's no one that can match him. But I love those situations where you're just waiting for all the elements to come together to make that
come together.
And places like Chandni Chowk or Varanasi are perfect areas to find those kinds of images.
To find those decisive moments.
Yeah, yeah. But yes, it is a decisive moment. It's a bit more than that. It sort of
Right.
goes beyond. It goes beyond the decisive moment.
Right. Right.
They're very complex images that a lot of people find difficult to read.
Hmm.
They're not easy.
Mhm.
Decisive moment. The classic Cartier Bresson or Salgado
Right.
is relatively easy for anybody to understand and appreciate.
Hmm.
But the stuff that Alex does isn't. It's more
Okay.
complicated. You have to live with it.
Right.
And I've always liked photographs that have depth,
Hmm.
that you can look at for years and never get tired of them. They keep
Right.
giving you something. Every time you look at them, you get a bit more from that image.
Right.
I don't like photographs that are too simplistic.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay. And there's this question that I want to ask you. How much do you think intuition plays a role when it comes to photography, and how important it is to to master the technical aspect of photography? How one should balance both of these?
Well, you have to master it technically.
Okay.
That's absolutely fundamental.
Right. That's the
It
most
has,
basic thing.
yeah, it has to be technical mastery. If you can't,
Right.
the camera always gets in the way of photography.
For sure. For sure.
It's between you and what's in front of you. The camera's a way of recording it, but it gets in the way of capturing that image. So the
Right.
more attention you have to pay to the technical aspects, the
Right.
more it's going to take away from the final image. So
Right.
master the technical side of it.
Hmm.
That is absolutely critical. And
Right.
just shoot a lot. I always use the analogy of a musician. You don't pick up a violin and expect to make beautiful music.
Right.
People pick up a camera, and because it's relatively easy to get an image with the camera,
Right.
they think
Right.
that's all there is to it. But really, you have to put the time in and work with the camera.
Right.
It's just as important.
You must have heard like people talking about it a lot, that it's all about the fancy gears and cameras and not about the
That's
photographers.
nothing to do with that.
Nothing to do with
Nothing
that.
whatsoever. No.
Right.
Although, having said that, obviously, technically, the better the camera, the better the result. But it's marginal.
Right.
It's hard to tell the difference. But say the difference between a smartphone and a camera. I can't use smartphones because I don't like the method of, I don't like to look at the back.
Right.
It's just awkward because I'm so used to, I want a camera that I can hold up to my eye. I like something that I can actually look at.
Right.
That's important. So, that's the only thing.
Right. Right.
It's the way you view.
So
Sorry, you're always asking about intuitive photography.
Yeah, I was asking about the role of intuition in photography.
I think it's the way I shoot. It's all intuitive.
Right.
Because I'm a documentary photographer.
Right.
And it almost has to be intuitive. The other extreme is a studio photographer.
Right.
Well,
and you don't like studio photography, I've read.
Oh, I hate it. It's too restrictive.
Because of
although I do a little bit this year. I've done a cookbook, and I did all the food photography, and it's nice for a week. If I had to spend my life doing that, it would drive me crazy.
Okay.
And
because it becomes monotonous after a time because of that.
I think so. I think it becomes very repetitive, using similar lighting setups. I guess there is, the best studio photographers do some innovative stuff, but it's not for me. I like to be outside. I like to find images.
Okay.
That's what I'm best at. I could never write fiction because I don't have the imagination for it.
Okay.
I'm a competent writer writing non-fiction. In fact, I'm writing a memoir at the moment.
Okay.
And I'm really enjoying it, but I couldn't write fiction because of the imagination needed. And it's the same with studio photography.
Right.
I'm very good at finding images, but I'm not good at creating them.
Right.
I
And
know, I know my
Hmm.
strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah, everyone I guess should understand their weaknesses and
Yeah.
all these things. So you mentioned in one of your blog that it's important to be critically aware of what is happening around you, and you also mentioned that most people look, but there are very rarely uh, people who actually see. So basically, what do you mean when you say actually seeing something, and how can a person train his photographer's eye?
Well, this comes back to my interest in painting to some
Right.
extent.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a very visual person.
Right.
Obviously, I'm a photographer.
Mm-hmm.
Everything. I'm always conscious of the visual world, and I'm
Right.
always looking and seeing.
Mm-hmm.
Someone once showed me something they do in workshops. They told you to put your hand over your watch. It doesn't work now because I've got an Apple Watch. But
Right.
they say put your hand over your watch
Mm-hmm.
without looking at it, and
Right.
tell me if it's a 12 at the top or just a mark.
Mm.
And a watch is something people wear all the time. They look
Right.
at multiple times a day,
Right.
but you look at it but don't see it.
Right. Right.
And it's absolutely true. Half the people in the classes wouldn't be
Mm-hmm.
able to tell you whether it's a 12 at the top or a single mark.
Right. Right. That's an
And
interesting analogy, by the
so
way.
you have to. I'm always, and I don't do it consciously,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm always looking at light.
Mm.
Everything I look at, I'm looking at analytically. It's
Right.
second nature.
Mm.
As I say, I'm not doing it consciously at all. It's intuitive, and I
Mm.
think you have to get to that stage. There are three stages in photography.
Mm-hmm.
There's taking a photograph, getting it back on your desktop or whatever, looking at it
Right.
and realizing it's a good shot.
Mm-hmm.
There's a second stage when you hold your camera up to your eye, look at it and realize it's a good shot.
Right.
And the third stage is when you don't even have to take the photograph and
Mm.
realize it's going to be a good shot.
And
So,
it takes hell lot of patience and
and it takes a lot of time to get to that. And the only way you get to it is by looking and seeing, learning to train your vision by
right.
whatever way is appropriate for you as an individual.
Mm-hmm.
I get it through art galleries, look at books, look at everything around you and
Right.
see what excites you,
Mm-hmm.
and then apply that to your photography.
Mm. Right. Right. And you see, when it comes to photography, I guess you and me both will agree that how important it is to have a personal style when it comes to photography. What do you think
I
is
think
the
I think
importance of
that style evolves.
right?
Although looking back, I looked back at photographs I took 60 years ago,
Right.
and I still respond to them. I'd still shoot them the same way now.
Okay.
So yes, but a lot of it comes through working through your influences. It's
Right.
easy when you start to copy other people's work.
Like we all start, like, I guess we all start by copying each other's work, but
And I guess I didn't, because I
okay.
didn't know anybody else's work.
Okay. Okay.
I literally didn't know anybody else's work. In
So
England,
that
we were very we were not aware of other photographers. I remember
okay.
one of the most exciting things that happened to me as a photographer was when the first photography gallery opened in London in
Okay.
1972.
Mm-hmm.
Sue Davis opened the Photographers Gallery. It's just called the Photographers Gallery, and
Okay.
started importing books from America.
Mm.
And the first book I bought was the day books of Edward Weston, or the two
Okay.
volumes.
Right.
And that was what really sold me on spending my life as a photographer.
Right.
Edward Weston day books were so
Mm-hmm.
influential.
Mm.
But that was the first time I had any access to other serious photographers' work. Like there
Mm-hmm.
are magazines and so on, and they inevitably influence you. There's a
Mm-hmm.
magazine called Picture Post that my dad used to get, which was a very early photojournalistic magazine. It preceded Life magazine. It was
Okay.
the British equivalent of Life.
Mm-hmm.
And Tom Hopkinson was the editor, one of the great picture editors who I got to know in his later years.
Okay.
And that influenced me, I guess, but I wasn't aware of the influence. But
Mm-hmm.
everything around you influences you.
Right.
But you have to be open to it.
Hmm.
You have to allow yourself to be open to those influences.
Right. That's true. That's true. And I've heard like people saying that when it comes to your work, you have to have like varying degree of works, and you have to like create different sorts of works. But at the same time, people also say that you have to have your unique personal style, and one should always stick to that personal style and not do something else. What do you think? How one can create balance between both these things?
But I've been,
Like for example, you must have heard about a photographer called Platon.
yeah,
So
his work,
his work is amazing, and his work is primarily about the portraits.
yeah,
He yeah,
all the
and
same
he's
style,
all the
always the
same
same style.
style, always the same style. But he's like famous,
Yeah, a lot of it's Mark. Well, he's a great photographer. He's
right?
a great photographer, but a
Mhm.
lot of it's marketing,
Marketing, marketing,
establishing yourself. You know, there's
right?
an Israeli photographer in
Uh,
London, Nadev Kandar, or Kandar,
okay.
who's charging clients $20,000 to $30,000 a
My
day.
God. Oh my God.
It's unreal, and
Right.
he won't accept an assignment until he's thought about it. You know, he
Hmm.
leaves art directors hanging, saying he's not sure
Okay.
he wants to do it, but it's all a game. And
Right.
he's an okay photographer. I've never thought he was one of the greats,
Hmm.
but he's an okay photographer, and he satisfies his clients. But a lot
Hmm.
of it's because the clients see him as this sort of trophy photographer.
Right.
He makes himself exclusive, very hard to get.
Hmm.
And I think that adds value to his work when it probably isn't merited sometimes.
Right.
You know, there's
It's all
a lot of game playing in this.
right.
It's
It's
like
all about marketing.
it's like using expensive cameras to some
Right.
extent. You know, a client, if you go and shoot an assignment for a client with an iPhone, they're
Right.
not going to take you as seriously as if you've
For
got
sure.
a Hasselblad high-end $50,000 Hasselblad. It's a game.
Right.
Yeah, it's all a game.
That's true. That's true. And so now I want to take you back to your, National Geographic story. You went to northern Pakistan at
Yeah.
that time. So how was the experience of visiting Pakistan? It was your first time at that time
Yes,
to
first time I've been to
Pakistan,
Pakistan. Yeah.
and you got into trouble as well there. You mentioned in one of your blog about the story of Hispar village and Nagar village.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would love if you could just narrate that story for me as well.
Well,
What really happened? How was it? What was the project about basically?
it was a huge international project jointly with Pakistanis, Chinese, and British.
Right.
And it was a basically geographical sciences and geological sciences. You know,
Mhm.
the Karakoram are at the junction of two tectonic plates,
Right. Right.
the
Mhm.
Asia plate and, I don't know, European plate, Euro-Asia. I'm not sure what the, but because of this, yes, this tectonic activity is,
Mhm.
there's something like 50 earthquakes a day there.
Okay.
Very minor, but
Mhm.
every day you'd read 50 earthquakes or more because there's so much activity,
Right. Under
volcanic,
the
and
ground.
yeah,
Mhm.
and we're measuring the depth of glaciers,
Mhm.
looking at looking at the ice cores to see how climate had changed over this millennium.
Right.
Uh, all kinds of geographical sciences. And I
Mhm.
was there as a photographer for
Mhm.
this, but I was also a climber because it's in the Karakoram. It was,
Right.
it was very, very high mountains, not far from
Mhm.
Timbuktu. And I was helping some of the scientists get to these very remote places on glaciers or on top of mountains or whatever.
Right.
And one of the Chinese scientists was in a very remote place on the Hispar Glacier, which
Okay.
Hispar is one of the longest glacial systems outside of the poles.
Mhm.
Um, and they were right in the middle of it. There were two of them.
Okay.
There's a Dong Jibin, I've forgotten the name of the other one, but the lead scientist, this other guy, broke his ankle.
Oh.
And there's no way out, really. No, and he didn't know if he'd broken his ankle. He's just having a lot of problems getting around. And so I was sent out with a friend of mine who was a climber who I've known forever from England, who sadly was killed in the same region a few years later with a rock fall. And we went out and we were sort of chatting away on the walk out. And I wasn't paying attention to where I was going. And then a helicopter came in to pick the Chinese guy up to take him out. And this friend of mine jumped on the helicopter, but there was no room for me. So I was left in the glacier with...
So you were left behind?
I was left behind with Dong Jibin, this other Chinese guy, who was never been in mountains before. And somehow I had to get him back to the base camp. Well, the camp at the side of the glacier, which was a nightmare because there was no path. I hadn't been taking care of where we were going. I hadn't been paying attention. I was too busy chatting to Paul Nunn, this friend. And we got back eventually. Everybody came down at that camp with hepatitis. And I thought I had too. And I felt pretty sick. So I went straight back down to a village called Hispar, where we'd hide some of the porters. This Hispar village was a 3-day walk away from where our main base camp was. It's a really long, complicated story, Vipin. And I get back to the village. They've never been very friendly at this village, and they've never allowed foreigners to go in. They have a sort of guest house somewhere outside.
They have like some cultural issues with foreigners at that time. Huge.
So I went to this guest house and I was too sick to go any further. And they looked after me really well. They fed me, and eventually they allowed me to go into the village. They took me into no women were in sight. All the women were hidden. But they actually took me into the village, and I had tea with them in the village, and came back to the hut, and a message was sent down to me saying, "We're having problems with the porters. Get out of the village as soon as you can. You're in danger," basically.
Right.
And they'd sent a porter from a feuding village up for me, which just added fuel to the problem. And it was Ramadan. So we thought, if we wait until they disappear at sunset for Ramadan,
for eating, right,
it'll still be light enough to be able to see a little bit, and they'll be too busy eating. So we'll be able to surreptitiously pack our bags and escape, because we had a guard in front of the hut. They were trying to keep me there.
Right.
And so we escaped, and somebody from the village heard us, and 3 people came up to stop us leaving. We got to a bridge, and they stopped us just before the bridge and started knocking my porter around. They're literally hitting and pushing my porter. And I had an ice axe, and I went in with an ice axe, swinging it around. And if I'd connected with one of them, I don't know what I'd have done. It would have been, it would have been stupid. But it scared them enough that they went running back to the village, and we carried on. And my porter said, we've got to keep going. They're going to come back after us. And I said, no, there's no way. It's dark. They're not going to do that. And then we could see lights down the valley.
They came running to your side
and heard them chasing us. Oh God, this is not good. And to cut the story short, we covered the 3-day walk in 24 hours. We so scared. We flew down that valley. I mean, you really have to see the photographs of it, because it was a tough, really tough hike. On steep, very, very steep hillsides, no paths. You're just running across loose rock and boulders and things. I don't know how we did it.
That's hell of a story.
I was a lot younger.
You should create a movie out of it. It's such an adventurous story.
Yeah, it was. It was. It's probably the scariest position I've ever been in.
Right.
I've been arrested a few times and had
Okay.
problems, but never life-threatening like that.
But you see, you have to be so adventurous to do, such kind of work. I mean, if one is not adventurous enough to, dive into such things, I guess people cannot do such things. I mean, working
Well,
for
that is
Nat Geo is
extreme.
very
That
hard.
was extreme.
Hmm.
So that wasn't a typical assignment.
Okay. Okay.
I could never be a war photographer.
Okay.
No,
Okay.
I couldn't. I never want to deliberately put
Mhm.
myself in a position of danger.
Okay. Okay.
If something happens, fine, I'll deal with it. But I
Mhm.
don't want to do it deliberately. I think that's foolhardy.
But do you like war photography?
No.
Like seeing the images?
If it's well done.
Okay.
Don McCullen was great.
Right.
James Natchway.
Mhm.
James Natchway's work I like a lot.
Okay.
Very powerful work.
Mhm.
But I like the aesthetics of it.
Mhm.
And it's always that's always a difficult question. One of the founders of Magnum, George Roger,
Right.
is one of the 4 founders of Magnum.
Mhm.
And he told me once that one of the most disturbing experiences he's ever had
Mhm.
as a Magnum photographer was
Mhm.
after the war, when the war
Mhm.
ended. He
Mhm.
was one of the first people to go into one of the concentration camps, Belsen, I
Okay.
think it was.
Mhm.
And there were just hundreds of bodies
Okay.
everywhere. There were dead bodies lying around. And he
Mhm.
found himself trying to make beautiful images of the
Mhm.
bodies, making them aesthetically pleasing. And he said he found it so disturbing that he would think like that.
Right.
It scared
Right.
him. It really scared him. But he's thinking as a
It's
photographer
sad.
rather
Mhm.
than a humanitarian.
Right. Right. That's true. That's true.
He wasn't
And
shit showing the horror. He's thinking as an artist, I guess.
right. And you see, when it comes to photography, I want to ask you this question: that uh, what do you think a photograph is all about? I mean, do you think the storytelling aspect of it is like important, or the aesthetic is important? Where do you base, like, what do
The,
you think
the,
about it?
for me, the ultimate the ultimate photograph is a marriage of the two.
Hmm.
And the
Okay.
perfect example of this is Sebastião Salgado.
Right.
Salgado's work combines both.
Hmm.
His are full of content and yet have very, very strong graphics and aesthetic. And to me, that's the ultimate. There are 2 areas of photography. There's the news photography, reportage, that is
Right.
all about content. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter if it looks nice or not, as long as there's content. And then there's the fine art photography,
Right.
which is all about looks. And often there's no real content at all. It's
Right.
just a pretty picture. And
Yeah.
if you can
It's all
marry,
about how it appeals to the eyes of the viewers.
yeah.
Hmm.
And both have their place, but for me, what I always strive for is something that marries the two. A photograph that
Right.
tells a story, yet is very pleasing to look at. And I
Mhm.
guess Cartier Bresson Sebastião Salgado school
Hmm.
typifies that.
Right. Do you think the art of photography is dying, like,
No, not at all.
days?
I think it's increasing, if anything, because there are more and more photographers
Mhm.
doing more and more interesting things. Some of them I just don't understand. I
Mhm.
don't resonate with a lot of schools of modern photography.
But
I'm
with
very
the
much
expansion,
I'm an old school.
right.
Yeah,
But
I'm an
with the
old school.
expansion of artificial intelligence, for example, the way they are editing the images and creating
Yeah,
unrealistic
I know a
images.
photographer here, Kath Simar, who is a Canadian wilderness photographer.
Okay.
And Kath's photographs are all highly, highly manipulated. She's done a lot of stuff in Patagonia, which is very spectacular,
Mhm.
but totally unreal. It doesn't
Unreal.
look unreal, but it
Right.
is. It's combined, and she's open about it. She tells people how she does it.
Mhm.
It's not a style that I'm particularly fond of.
Right.
And she's extremely good at it. And there are a lot of photographers doing manipulated work like that. AI is Yeah, particularly what's it called? The new Word version. That's right.
ChatGPT?
Yes.
ChatGPT.
Yeah. It's unbelievable what it
It's
will do.
unbelievable. It's
A friend,
unbelievable.
a friend of mine wrote a poem about me using it and did it in seconds. Just put a few lines in.
Yeah,
And
yeah. I've tried it. I've tried it.
it's uncanny. Uncanny.
It's unbelievable. I mean, there's this day, the other day, I was like, hanging around on ChatGPT, and I just gave the instruction that I want a poem on photography, and I received that poem in like few seconds,
Oh yeah, yeah.
and the poem was amazing.
Yeah. Well, this one about me is because it's not only does it mention me, but it
Right,
tells you about everything I've done.
right.
It's just incredible. It blew me away.
Where do you think we are heading with the artificial intelligence?
Who knows? It's scary. It'll. I don't see it ever completely replacing the
Humans.
human element,
Mhm.
but it will for a lot of things.
Mm.
I'm sure a lot of copy editing for advertising. Well, a lot of stuff. Small town newspapers.
Right. And these
Because
days, I mean, yeah. Please,
yeah,
please go on.
it'll cut out. Yeah, it'll cut out salaries for people.
Right.
It'll be a huge cost-saving device. So
For sure.
inevitably, it's going to be adopted for certain industries.
Right. I mean, you don't have to like remember anything now. You just have to have an idea of what exactly you want the output to be. Just give instructions. You have to be like good with instructions now, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And AI will do everything for you.
yeah.
Right. So I was like, I was watching your videos on YouTube with Mark Silber.
Yeah.
Is he a friend of yours? I mean,
So he is now.
he's now.
Yeah. Yeah. It's another instance of being around a long time and being found through third parties, by networking.
Okay.
Another photographer he'd interviewed recommended me to him.
Mm-hmm.
And then Mark and I became friends and did this whole series of YouTube videos.
Okay.
We're going to do some more. But
Mm-hmm. I guess I'm not sure, but I guess he'll be my next guest on over here.
Mark, good.
Yeah, I'm trying to like convince him for the interview.
Yeah, he'll do it.
Yeah.
In fact,
let's see.
I've got to call him. I'll tell him he has
For
to go.
sure.
Yeah. Or
Please, please.
I won't do another YouTube video with him.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for that.
No, this is great, Vipin. I've really enjoyed talking to you.
Yeah. Same here. Same here.
Yeah.
And tell me more about like your workshops. We can talk about that as well.
I've been teaching workshops for the past 40 years,
Okay.
but only seriously for the last 10, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been doing workshops predominantly in Asia, Vietnam a couple of times, Myanmar a couple of times,
Right.
Cambodia.
And when was your last photo tour?
India. The last one we did was Cuba. It was our third one to Cuba.
Okay.
And we're doing another one to Cuba next year, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And then before that, we did one to Oaxaca in Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to repeat that again this year.
Right.
And we try to keep the costs low because I do them really to be able to travel to these places.
Right.
I used to be able to do it working for magazines.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, that market no longer exists. So I still want to travel and I still want to visit these places.
Right.
So I do them really just to cover my costs.
I understand. And
Because
any plans for India?
Always. I come back to India in a heartbeat. Yeah.
I would love to meet you.
I have friends in India.
Okay.
Do you know Raghu Ray?
Raghu Rai, yes.
Yeah.
Amazing photographer.
Yeah, Raghu.
Legendary photographer from India.
I haven't seen Raghu for a long time, but a lot of people I'd like to actually. Pablo Bartholomew, is he still around?
What? Can you please tell me the name?
Pablo Bartholomew. I think he's gone.
Okay.
I think he's
don't
gone.
remember the person. There is Bharat Sikka. Have you heard about him?
Who?
Bharat Sikka.
No.
He's a photographer from India. His work is amazing as well.
Not Bashkar.
Bharat Sikka.
Bashkar.
Bhaskar.
Bhaskar. What's his last name? Bhaskar. I've forgotten his last name. There's also a woman photographer whose work I really like a lot. She also paints. What's her name?
Where is she from?
Shweta Malhotra.
Shweta Agarwal.
Malhotra. Do you know her?
Okay, Shweta Malhotra. Right.
She's in Delhi, I think. I think Shweta's in Delhi. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I like her work. I don't know her, but I like her images.
And any other like contemporary photographers that you like or you love to watch their work?
In India or
anywhere? In India or abroad, anywhere for that matter.
No one specifically. There are a number of people I follow, but they tend to be old school like me.
Okay.
But I'm always looking at stuff. I'm always looking through books and Instagram accounts and so on.
Right.
But no one jumps out at me as being someone that I think is exceptional.
Okay.
One of the problems I have today is that you can make a reputation as a photographer by just shooting a very narrow set of photographs over a very short time, and then do a book on that. You know, that's, to me, it's crazy. I've seen books produced on photographed over 2 days, and the whole reputation is built on it. And art gallery exhibits of the photographs.
Right.
There's no depth to them. They can be pleasing to look at, possibly, but that sort of bothers me a bit, because it sort of indicates that they have a style, because they've all been shot in such a short time period, and it's really nothing to do with style. It's the space of time over which they were shot.
But I guess it's very easy for people nowadays to do that. I mean,
oh yeah, it is
coming out with books and all. It's very common, and people, keep on doing that.
Yeah. Well, I do. I've done almost 50 books, but they're a very different kind of book.
That's
no. If anybody's interested in workshops, then get in touch with me through Instagram or whatever.
Sure. I'll also share the link in the video as well.
Oh, that'd be great. That'd be really nice.
The video as well.
Yeah.
And I would love to share my work with you as well. So you can critique my work as well, my personal work, because I'm into black and white photography.
Yeah, but a lot of portraits.
Portraits and street style photography as well. It's more or less fine art photography. I mean, 2022, my work, one of my image was exhibited at International Center of Photography in New York. And
really? That's great.
Yeah. And next year in 2021, 3 of my photographs were exhibited here in Delhi in a gallery. All black and white photography. So I would love to hear it from you. Like if you could just critique my work.
I'd love to stay in touch.
Sure. Please. I would love to do that.
Hopefully we'll meet in person before too long.
Sure. Whenever you visit India for a photo tour or for any purpose, I would love to get in touch with you.
Yeah, me too. That's
sure.
That would be great.
Lovely talking to you, Bob. Lovely.
You too, Vipin. Hopefully I'll talk to you very soon.
Sure. Why not? Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you. Actually, I didn't really know what to expect. This has been far better.
I really love the conversation.
Yeah, your questions were really good. Yeah, they went beyond what I'm normally asked. Because a lot of stuff, a lot of things I repeat all the time. Like the whole getting into National Geographic and that stuff. I've said that a million times. But a lot of other stuff came out of this today, which is really good. I found that
I'm glad. I'm glad you feel that way.
Good.
Thank you so much.
Get to bed.
Sure. Thank you. Take care, mate.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.